Alright, so I just want to record a basic thing about parsing defense and offense in LP. A lot of people, when they start playing the game, are like, I don't know what I can do on defense, I don't know how to get out of the corner, and quite frankly, this game's got like so much stuff you can do on offense. So it's kind of hard to figure out, especially because with ground normals being air unblockable, it's really easy to get got. So the key ideas that you want to be thinking about on defense are your goals are to get your opponent to push themselves pretty far out on block, like here or something, or get your opponent to overcommit on offense, something that you can mash, guaranteed jump out of, anything that you know you can punish. So like, I've got a couple recordings here, just to go over some basic examples. And I'm going to be choosing Wara to start, because Wara has a really slow mash. His jab is 6 frames. So to start here, I've got like just basic layer 1 offense recording. Coma is going to mash. Coma, pretty common character, right? He's just going to do 2-3-6A on block, and he's going to rebeat, or he's going to hit that 2A, right? If I'm just like mashing on defense, I'm going to win because he's minus after the Rekka. This is like one basic case, the most simple case of get your opponent to overcommit on offense. Opponent is minus, they're still pressing buttons, you're allowed to take your turn. And if I'm not believing in my 2A, as long as I have a button that's fast enough to reach, it's going to work. Wara, his 2B is too slow here, but to compensate, his 2A is really big, and it's going to hit. So in this case, I can mash to punish Coma for mashing on his minus frames. Alternatively, I can jump out. Notice how Coma is pushed out so far that his 2A whiffs here. Since I have the space, I can jump out. Pretty simple example, not the most realistic case, but it just shows the basic case of Coma is either pushed out too far and I can jump out to escape, or he's going to overcommit and I can punish. A little bit more stuff going on with recording too. He's doing the full Rekka, and he's pressing 2C. Something you might see a lot from newer players, right? You do your full safe on block pressure string, he's pushed pretty far out, go for big reaching one. If I press 2B, I can win because I'm Wara and my 2B reaches pretty far. But if I'm not careful and I'm thinking, okay, you're minus, I'm going to pull up, Coma's button will reach far enough that it's going to hit me. Or if I'm like, oh, I guess this 2A will actually win. But if I've got a shorter 2A, I might get whiff punished on that. If I try to jump and I'm too late, you can see like right there, I might get hit. But again, Coma doing this whole thing on block, he's pushed out pretty far. I've got a lot of choices here. If I mash too late, I can get hit. If I jump too late, I can get hit. But if I recognize minus on block move, I'm out of it. Pretty basic case. Again, Coma just pushes himself out, or he overcommits. But all of those are like your opponent is just mashing all their buttons. They're doing basic shit on block. It's easy to be ready for that. She's got a little bit more involved recordings coming up. He's gonna IAD reset here, right? If I'm mashing this just blindly, I'm going to get counter hit by the IAD because it's gonna crush my poke. Now as a character like Wara, I've got a lot of good buttons for hitting that. If I hit my crouching B, it's actually gonna work. But some characters whose crouch normals are going to be closer to the ground, they're not really going to work out in this situation. Wara's will hit because this character's buttons hit pretty high up, but you'll see that even that long-reaching 2A, not gonna cut it. However, 5A is gonna work. This goes back to the basic idea of Coma is over-committing on his offense. He's minus, and he's picking an option that beats one of my options, but it's still not guaranteed to be safe. So since I know I have the frames to press, if I'm looking for that IAD, I can potentially press them. I know Coma's minus, I'm looking for him to do something, I'm punishing him for overextending. On the other hand, if I try to jump out here, this might be a bad example because it's a very simple recording, but if Coma's pressing another button, I could potentially get got, especially if I jump forward on this. Basic idea being, one other example of a reset is going to be IAD, but it's still unsafe because Coma was minus. Next recording, we got some rebeats here. Koma's going for a basic block string, rebeat, 2C. As Wara, I can kind of poke this out pretty comfortably. But again, Koma's pretty far out, right? Once he does this, even if I block it, how is he hitting me? He can't even reach, right? If I'm trying to fuzzy jump, if I'm like... You can see on the virtual stick here, I'm going to be like doing a delay jump such that when he stops, I can get that jump out. But if he keeps going on block, then I'm going to keep blocking. And now Koma is pushed out, and I have a chance to escape. Now, why am I talking about jump out? This is something that if you've watched the JG video is like a pretty poor concept in Melty Blood. Jump back, super double jump 9, SDJ 9. It's like a core defensive maneuver. Notice how if I jump and then I IID, I'm out here, but I'm like pretty close to Koma's range. If he's on the ground, he can maybe jump and hit me. If I just jump 9, I actually land in front of Koma. I'm not really covering any space at all. But the super double jump? I'm like mid-screen now. I'm way out of it. So this is like your layer 1 defensive option when your opponent is going to be doing something that pushes them out. You want to reset neutral, just be extra safe, because as you've already seen from these other examples, if I'm trying to mash and I press late, I can get counter hit. If I just want to get out of a corner, be set free, I've got to make my opponent cover that jump out. J7, SCJ9. Turn the recording back on, and we'll see that Koma, he's nowhere near there. He can maybe catch my landing because Koma's doing some non-committal offense in this recording. I just press one button and I kind of let it rock. But the basic idea being Koma creates a lot of space. I can now escape because he's pushed himself out. Got another example here. We have Koma redash in here. This is rebeating to redash. This is where if I'm doing a really late jump, I got it that time, but if I do like a really late jump because I'm looking for him to do something, it could be a little bit scarier to get hit. Or if I'm not Wara and I've got stubbier buttons, I was practicing this as Tono earlier, there's a chance that I could get whiff punished by the redash, because Koma is staying pretty safe. If I turn on the frame data bar, right, we can't really see it there, but he's only -1. You can see it for a moment right as I pause there. After rebeat, Koma's only -1, gives him kind of a lot of breathing room if I want to try and challenge in this space. You'll notice right there my delay jump kind of got caught again, because I reacted really late. But here, we're still seeing Koma pushes himself out. That redash is not guaranteed. I can mash, because he's overcommitting, redashing from very far out. Or he's pushing himself really far out. If I'm looking for how far he gets pushed out, I see that 5C, I'm out. And notice I'm pointing out here that I'm looking for the 5C, because that's the point at which he gets really pushed out, right? Late into the block string, he goes for a heavier hitting move. He's out. He's pushed out. I can get out. Pretty basic example there. Next recording. Some stagger pressure here, right? That little delay 5C, rebeat 5A. If I want to dash out, I can get got. If I'm not careful, I guess I kind of messed up this recording a little bit. But yeah, you can see right there, if I press that 2A, I'm whipping, I'm getting punished. If I'm smashing that 2A out of block once he's out. So this is kind of where Melty gets pretty difficult, because as you can see, even the inconsistency of my recordings, when there's no buffer on your ground normals in this game, a lot of these situations can get kind of dicey. If you're used to a game like Guilty Gear, where you might find your way to RPS out with buttons, like a 6P, a 2S maybe, even a 2K or 2D in some cases, this will feel pretty uncomfortable, because in some of these examples, even when I'm using static recording, my mash works, and in some cases, I'm getting countered. It's a pretty volatile game, because there's a lot of variations in timing and spacing when you don't have a buffer. But that's where, again, we see Koma has pushed himself out. I will get to jump out here. And in order for Koma to catch that, he's got to jump after me. That might be my next recording. Not quite. It might be recording number 8. So, I have Koma just doing a J9, J8. It's not really going to hit me in this example, but you can kind of see the idea, right? If I'm jumping out here, and Koma jumps here, he's still pretty close to me. We go to view screen here. It's a little bit jank frame to freeze on. But you can see that there's a lot of angles where Koma can kind of catch me, right? If he air dashes, if he jumps again and I jump again, I'm not exactly out of a corner. This is kind of like that corner situation, but now we're in the air, right? Koma still has advantageous positioning on him. So, my layer 1 answer of I want to jump out, not the best case here. But there's still a lot of space. Koma's pushed himself out pretty far. Going for that basic jump. If I just mash 5A, I'm not actually going to hit because he's not overcommitting with an IAD. He's not doing something that I can immediately punish right away. Even if I press that 2B, I can whiff. If Koma's looking for any of these things, like an IAD, JC or something could potentially hit me, he's not overcommitting. But that's where we go back to the other idea, right? He's not overcommitting, but he's creating a lot of space. If I'm looking for that jump, I can actually run out. This is the basic defensive RPS of Melty Blood and catching escapes. If Koma's going to be pushed out and try and catch me on the ground, there's a lot of cases where I can jump out, as we've seen. If Koma wants to try and catch me jumping out, I can run out. He can't cover both of these at once. Now, if Koma's looking really carefully with a dive kick or something, this character in particular might be able to come down and catch my run. But the idea being that if we're talking about just the basic tools of Melty Blood, a very normal pressure situation that translates across characters, when someone jumps here, there's enough space to potentially run out, potentially make a choice, even if it's going to be something a little different, like I'm going to try an air-to-air or something. I'm not truly jailed into the corner just because my jump out is potentially getting caught here. Let's go back to recording 7. I'm not even sure what I had here to begin with. Alright, yeah, another rebeat string here. We're seeing that rebeat 5A into 2C, and then he pulls himself back in. This is where, especially with a slow mash like Wara, if I'm mashing right away, right, you can see me kind of going for that fuzzy mash. There's a timing at which I can get it, but if I'm not really confident in it, and I delay it too long, that's where something like a rebeat 5A with 2C can potentially catch me. Koma's going to redash back in. I'm seeing the rebeat. I'm a little too slow to press. I get got. With the recording, it's pretty easy for me to mess up showing myself getting punished because I've recorded these about 30 minutes ago and I know what he's going to do. But in the heat of a match, getting this timing is going to be tough if I want to punish it. And if you're new to the game, if you're fighting a character like Koma here, it's going to feel like I've got no answers on defense. How can I fight my way out? Even when he's creating this space, I'm trapped in this corner forever. You can see even as I let the recording rock and I'm just holding down back, Koma keeps pushing his way into the corner. At face value, if I've never really looked at this before, it can look like Koma's got me in jail forever. But again, we're seeing that Koma's kind of pushing himself out. A late jump might get caught by that QC. It goes pretty far. This is going to be a very common case in this game, using a long button to catch. So what we're seeing here compared to before is ultimately Koma is varying the option. We saw just raw block string ending in that Rekka. We saw rebeat into buttons. Now we're seeing a little bit different timing of rebeat than we've seen with the other ones that also use the fact that Koma pulls himself back in with a move like 2C. So, we see that 2C, rebeat, and now just pushed too far out. He's pushed himself out once here. Right? He's going to do that 2C again, and once he rebeats, he already started far out when he used that 2C. So, now, off block, he's far again off that 2A, and this is still in recovery. I'm going to have time to jump out when he redashes. This is the exact same situation we saw with the previous rehab. He's going to be able to potentially redash if I'm doing something on the ground. He can jump after my jump here, but this is a chance where I can escape. I can try to see if he's going to catch my jump out, and if I'm right, I get out. And if he tries to catch my jump out, I could maybe run out. And if he goes for a full redash, then I can mash. We'll see Koma go for that rebeat again. That dash is not safe. If I turn on the frame data bar, maybe a little bit more clear. Maybe if I don't mash there. Right? We can see right here, Koma's done recovering. He has that dash in, and you can see all this gray space on the top here where I would have been actionable, and there's this big gap here in what Koma's doing. This redash is not safe. When someone redashes in from far away, that is your chance to match. You've watched the Alps video, the intro to Melty Blood. I believe this is covered in that, where one of the basic points that you want to look for on defense is over-committed redashes. So even though if I'm just like blindly mashing here, there's going to be cases like that where I'm going to get counter hit, I can get hit. But when I'm looking for Koma to be pushed out, we go back to that same situation. He's pushed out, so he's either over-committing and I can punish, or I have a chance to escape. Where even after that, he's pushed out so far, I can jump out. Now, I think 9 might be one of the more involved recordings, even if it's the simplest thing Koma's doing. Anyone who's played Melty Blood for a long time has seen someone do this from before. Just two-way stagger, redash. Very common situation in this game, and it's a little shifty because if I'm defending here in a real match, I'm watching for when Koma might want to cancel into like a 2B or a 2C and frame trap me for just mashing here. When like, if I know he's going to redash, I can potentially just mash. The two-way staggers can catch my mash. Well, you'll notice here that even off these 2As, if I'm looking for that redash, I have a chance to potentially press. It's going to be a little more error prone with a slow mash like Juarez. But all this to kind of show that redash, even at close range, is not guaranteed. It is not wholly safe. So, if you see your opponent wants to redash at you, you know that you have options. You can try to jump out. You can try to mash. The big idea just being a redash is not safe. It's still something that you can have options to beat. Now, this doesn't work with extended training mode turned on, so I'm going to turn this off for a second and relaunch the game. But this is where a lot of people, if you play H-Moon, you will feel a little bit of a difference, or why people will often tell you that H-Moon defense is worse than C or F-Moon. And that's because H-Moon lacks access to the mechanic EX guard. I'm going to go back to recording 9 here. You'll notice that if I start, and I'm not going to hit it 100% here, I'm not very good at this. But you see that when I hit this EX guard, notice that Koma pushes himself out way more. And also, it reduces my hit stop by 2 frames. So, if I'm EX guarding here, I make it potentially easier to mash out. Not enough, as you just saw, that I can mash between hits, but he gets pushed out more. I'm more advantageous. I have more time to potentially press out, or I just create more space to jump out. And look at that. I jumped all the way out. Koma can dash after me, but I did get back to the mid-screen safely. So basically, if there's anything you take away from this, wait for your opponent to push themselves out. Fuzzy jump is a good way to catch any grounded approach if someone gets themselves pushed out. And redashes are an overcommitment. You can challenge redashes. You can maybe jump out of redashes. This is how you can start to find your outs. And part of the strength of Melty Blood and why this can be really difficult is, I mean, even while crafting some of these, it was really hard to come up with strings because there's so much that you can vary. If I set Water to block here, I'm just like vaguely gonna hit buttons. And it's a lot harder to like figure out how to get out of something like that, because this is already different timing than what we've seen so far. But even in this basic case, if I want to just fuzzy jump here, that extra press, even off a quick rebeat, I can still jump out. So layer 1 defense, try to jump out as your opponent creates space. look for chances where your opponent might redash or overcommit to a reset. That's all I wanted to cover for basic defense. For basic offense, now I've gotten my hit, I'm on the offensive. How do I stop this from happening to me? How do I keep my opponent in the corner? How do I stop them from just getting out for free? I'm going to show this with like one of the most basic characters in the game in F-Roa. He's got an offensive situation that's very common for a lot of the cast, where if I turn on the frame data bar and if I set the dummy to not block. Oh, whoops. Oh my gosh, Coma, I forgot Coma is weird to combo as his character. Maybe I gotta turn it off from Coma. Let's go with easy to combo character. 5th color. Whoops. Oh my gosh. If I could hit a combo. This situation, you can see Roa gets pushed out pretty far. He's only +5 here. Some characters he's only +4. What do? 5 frames. Takes way more than 5 frames to get over here. You can even see the startup of dash is 8 frames. Right, I'm -3 dashing in off of that air throw. What do? If I think my opponent is going to like press, if they're going to do nothing, F-Roa can do something like this. He's going to just stop you from doing anything. If I set the dummy to block, that's minus. My turn is over, right? And naturally, this is also weak to an option like dash. Let's see if I can set the dummy to dash out. Forward dash. Oh my gosh. Wow. Wario just dashed out. So what do I do here? It looks like F-Roa has no Oki. This character's got no offense. But someone wants to dash out. 5 frames is still enough that Wario dash, 5 frame startup, I can still check that with a button. Now, there's not really a whole lot of flashy stuff to see off an example like this, but kind of the core idea being, even when I'm only +5 and this far, I have no Oki, I can't get a meaty, I can't force my opponent to make a choice, I still have the opportunity to play around my opponent's defensive habits. If my opponent, I think, is going to just sit there and chill, I can start to pull up. If my opponent wants to press, I can maybe ID. I can do something like fake a dash into ID, try and catch a low poke. I could even just see if they're going to react to a walk forward. I can check them for sitting still. I can check them for trying to press out of the corner. Basic idea being that even when I only have a little bit of advantage, I don't have a real strong Oki situation to force my opponent to hold something, I can still play around my opponent's defensive habits. What I'll do personally when I'm playing F-Row is I think my opponent's really going to respect me. They're afraid of this. They're afraid of getting checked if they press. They're afraid of IID over a low poke. I'm going to just dash in and get my pressure. I may only be +5. I may be -3 here. But if my opponent is looking for one of these other things, right? If they're expecting to block something, they aren't always going to be ready for me to dash. If my opponent is looking for me to do something like this, or if my opponent's looking for me to dash, they're not necessarily going to be ready for me to IAD over at them. If my opponent's looking for me to dash, they may not be ready for me to just walk forward, walk back, or just check them with a lightning, or even do something like this. This might even catch forward dash if I do far lightning, close lightning. I'm not 100% sure. Because again, so much stuff in this game is very variable. Yeah, that doesn't work. But on -2, if my opponent wants to do this, they're -3 on a 5-frame dash. Notice how here it says, oh, sorry, with the neutral frame, I'm +4 even. Correct me if I'm wrong about the neutral frame there. I'm just seeing the one little gray frame there. I'm pretty sure that's what that is. I'm not really the most keen on technical details. But either way, you see here is I'm advantageous after something like this. My opponent's looking for me to do something. They want to challenge after lightning. They pick the most straightforward answer and dash out. I can check the dash out with the button. In other words, even without a lot of advantage, I've got a lot of room to look for my opponent's defensive habits and start forming plans around them. So between these two things, this is kind of how you start to form game plans in Multi-Blade. When your opponent has you in the corner, you can look for their rebeats, you can look for where they're going to be dashing into you. You want to be looking for an overcommitment like a redash, or for your opponent to push themselves out here where you can jump out. When you're on offense, you want to look for what your opponent is looking for. Are they looking for you to check them with something? Are they looking for you to pull up? Are they looking for you to overcommit? Are they looking for you to be spaced out so they can jump out? If I think my opponent wants to jump out here, this will catch a quick jump. Let's see if I can not hold guard. If I set my opponent to jump back here, because they want a J7 SDJ9, I can at least make them block this, right? And if they want to jump forward, if I'm +5, I can similarly meet them in the air. So I can be looking for all of my opponent's defensive options here. Let's say I'm going to have the dummy just get a little bit better of a visual here. Right? I'm pretty close to being able to just check Wara. I might even be able to do that with like a JB here. Not quite. Case in point sort of being my opponent's looking for me to overextend in one of those ways. I've still got ways to kind of vary my timings, look for what my opponent's going to do, and at that point we're playing the game, making decisions against each other, and that's kind of how you can get started in Melty.